Hello everyone, hope you are all doing wonderfully well this evening. We are gonna do a quick exam review for uh, our class, Human Biology 2020 fall. It's gonna be exam review for lecture exam 3. I'm gonna post at 12 o'clock at midnight in about 3 hours. Right now, it's today's Thursday, November 19, 10 p.m. and I'm gonna post this video as soon as I finish up the exam review. I'll post it on YouTube and send you out an email. Remember, even though the exam is gonna be posted in about 3 hours, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to attempt the exam and take the exam as soon as you see it available. I have extended the deadline for the exam well until after Thanksgiving. You will have until November 30th, Monday, November 30th at midnight to submit the exam. So don't feel rushed that you have to take the exam right away just because it's posted, and because as soon as you click on a start, then you have to finish up the exam in one sitting, even though you're going to have 300 minutes, which is about 5 hours. You cannot go back to the exam the next day. You have to finish it within the 5 hour, or when you open it, the timer is going to start. So you won't be able to pause it and go back to it like the homework assignments that we have. The exam is gonna be 38 questions. It's gonna cover materials from, well, it's supposed to cover materials from week 9, starting with the special senses, but I have not included any questions from week 9, which is the special senses. I'm gonna save that for the final exam. Basically, with the final exam, we're gonna have a special senses, the urinary system, and the reproductive system. Those three are gonna be 40% of the final exam, and about the other 60% is gonna be cumulative, and it's gonna cover the materials from week 1 all the way through week 12, basically. But the 40% of the final exam is going to be urinary, reproductive, and special senses, which was on week 9. As far as this exam that's coming up in a few hours, there are going to be 38 questions. Out of the 38 questions, 37 of them are multiple choice, and there is one matching question. So that's going to make 38 questions. And I have also this time added the bonus questions. Instead of doing a separate bonus assignments, I have gone ahead and added the last 2 questions as bonus questions. So question 39 and question 40 are going to be our bonus questions. Question 39 is going to be a multiple answer question, which is going to be A, B, C, D, and it's going to be one of those select all that may apply. And it's a blood related question. It's going to be 3 points. And then question 40, which is the second bonus questions, it's going to be a essay question, which is going to be pretty detailed if you want the 10 points, because it's gonna be worth 10 points, and it's going to be on heart and blood vessels. So you have question 39 and 40. It's going to be 13 points of bonus points that you can earn. And then you have question 1 through question 38, which is going to make up 130 points of the exam, which is how the exam is. That's how many points each exam is. It's 130 points. Exam 1, 2, 3, except the final exam, I believe it's 180 points. But the regular lecture exams are each 130 points. Anyway, it's gonna start out. We're gonna have week 10 blood. There have 10 questions on that. Week 11, which we covered heart and blood vessels. Usually in a regular anatomy and physiology course, which is ANP1 and ANP2. In that class, what I would do is 1 week we would cover heart, and 1 week, the following week, we would cover blood vessels. But because of this course, the way that I have set it up, basically a condensed version of ANP 1 and 2. So I consider this to be a little bit more difficult course than ANP 1 and then ANP 2, because we are covering almost everything that's important from ANP 1 and ANP 2 in one class, calling it human biology. So that's why we are covering heart and blood vessel in 1 week. So that was week 11. There are 18 questions on that. And then week 12 was our respiratory system. And there are 10 questions on respiratory system. So 10, 10, 18, that's how many? 38 questions. Okay, let's start the exam review. We're gonna start with the 10 questions of respiratory system. So the first thing that I need you guys to know that's very important is function of surfactant. And you can find that on page 8 of respiratory system supplemental notes. The first section of page 8 of respiratory system supplemental notes, where it says alveolar structure and the respiratory membrane. In that section, if you read the paragraph, you will get to the line that it says basically gives you the definition of surfactant. And what surfactant really is, and what I'm looking for you to understand and get out of that paragraph, is all that what it does, it basically reduces the surface tension and it prevents collapse of the alveoli. So it prevents the collapse of the alveoli. So that's a surfactant question. Next question, I want you to know the mechanism of breathing, specifically inhalation, not exhalation. The question is about inhalation. And for that, I would refer you to 2 sections. The first one is gonna be page 6 of respiratory system supplemental notes. The section is where it says section, it's on the left side, it says application mechanics of breathing. Read that paragraph, and one thing that's the vocabulary that you're going to see different in the question and in the reading that I've just told you on page 6 of the supplemental notes is that you're going to see alveolar pressure, and then you're going to see intrapulmonary pressure. And you're going to be like, well, what is intrapulmonary pressure? I just read about alveolar pressure, where they can be used interchangeably. And all they mean is basically the pressure inside the lungs. They call it the alveolar pressure or intrapulmonary pressure. the pressure inside the lungs. So the main thing that you're going to get out of that paragraph or that section when you read about the mechanics of breathing section of the inspiration or inhalation is that when you inhale or when you inspire, the pressure falls. Which pressure falls? The pressure inside the lungs. So the interpulmonary pressure falls, alveolar pressure falls during inhalation. During exhalation, alveolar pressure rises or intrapulmonary pressure rises or pressure inside the lungs rises. That's during expiration. But we're talking about inhalation and inspiration. So page 6 of respiratory system, supplemental notes, section application mechanics of breathing. Also, if that's not enough, I would refer you to page 258 of respiratory system text reading. There is a beautiful figure 10.9. Look at it, and in that figure it doesn't mention alveolar pressure or it doesn't mention intrapulmonary pressure. All it says is pressure inside the lungs. So when you see it has a drawing of inspiration and then it says pressure falls. What it means by that is that the intrapulmonary pressure falls, the alveolar pressure falls. So don't get those mixed up. They are all used interchangeably. So that's the other question. Okay, next, very easy question. The next one is a pretty easy question. I want you to be able to distinguish among internal and external respiration. Where you can find that, the definition of those is page 1 of respiratory system lecture notes, section 18.1. And also you can find it on page 10, last paragraph of respiratory system supplemental notes. Where it talks about external respiration and internal respiration. So you can find it in two different sections. The first one is you can look in the lecture notes, respiratory system lecture notes, page 1, section 18.1. And the second place that you can look for it, if that's not enough and you want to get a better understanding or a different way of terminology that's put together, you can go to page 10 of respiratory system supplemental notes, last paragraph of page 10, where it talks about external respiration and internal respiration. So definitely know the definition of those. Next question is about chemoreceptors and respiration. So chemoreceptors and respiration. Basically, with chemoreceptors, I would recommend that you definitely go to page 10 of your respiratory system lecture notes, page 10 of respiratory system lecture notes, section 18.26, and read the paragraph that talks about a stimulation of chemoreceptors and what happens when the arterial blood carbon dioxide increases? What is the response of the chemoreceptors? And also, for that question, I would also recommend that you look at page 20 of respiratory system supplemental notes under functions of chemoreceptor, and read the paragraph or read the line where it starts with central chemoreceptor. So that's page 20 of respiratory system supplemental notes under function of chemoreceptors, subsection of central chemoreceptor, or page 10 of respiratory system lecture notes, section 18.26. Next one is goes back to the tissue lectures that we had previously, but it's related. It's want you to be familiar with the tissues of different components of respiratory tract, specifically alveoli. So I want you to be familiar with the types of what kind of tissues different components of the respiratory tract contain. Specifically here, alveoli. Hint, most of them are smooth muscles. One of them specifically is connective tissues. So for that, I'll just give away the answer if you were listening carefully. Which one should be connective tissue that would separate it out from rest of the components of the respiratory tract. But however, for that question, I would refer you to page 9 of respiratory system supplemental notes. Page 9 of respiratory system supplemental notes. Next question is basically respiratory division structure. It's more of an anatomy question here. Respiratory system division structure, specifically bronchioles. So be familiar with bronchioles, where they are located, and I would refer you to page 5 of respiratory system lecture notes, objective H as Harry. Next one is a very important one. Basically, there are two questions on this topic that I'm about to talk to you about, and it's very important for when we are covering the respiratory system. And the question is basically what causes the lungs to expand or inflate. For that, I would refer you to page 7 of respiratory system lecture notes, section 18.15. Page 7 of respiratory system lecture notes, section 18.15. Again, what I want you to get out of it when you read it, it might be a little bit confusing, so that's why I'm gonna make it simple and explain it to you right away. Gas pressure, or the pressure inside the lungs, is lower than the atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure being the pressure outside. So we are looking at the pressure inside the lung versus the pressure outside. And normally at resting point, the gas pressure is lower inside the lungs and gets even lower during inspiration as compared to the atmospheric pressure. So this basically causes the lungs to inflate. The difference in the pressure. And what kind of a difference is it? It's a negative difference, okay? Because as I just said, during inspiration or inhalation, the pressure inside the lungs gets even lower than the outside pressure, or gets even lower than the atmospheric pressure. So we are talking about negative pressure between the pleural. So that's what causes the lungs to inflate and expand. Remember that. That's a very important concept. You might come across it again in future when you take any sort of entrance exam for MCAT, PCAT, dental school, medical school, pharmacy school, nursing programs. If there is a question on anatomy and physiology, they always like to cover this topic of as to why, what is the reason behind lung expansion. And that was the simplest version that I could explain to you. Next question is transport of carbon dioxide in blood. How is carbon dioxide is transported in blood? Very simple. Refer you to page 16 of respiratory system supplemental notes. Go to the description section, number 2, and read number 2 on description section of page 16 on respiratory system supplemental notes, and it tells you how carbon dioxide is transported in blood. Next one, I want you to know about respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. Not too detailed, just know, like, for example, lung disease causes which one. If you have lung disease or you're an elderly at an old age and you have difficulty breathing, any sort of emphysema, COPD, asthma, and when you get older, difficulty breathing, is that going to lead to respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis? Are you holding on to more carbon dioxide, or are you holding on to less carbon dioxide? Is the pH going up or is the pH going down? Is it becoming more alkalosis or is it becoming more acidosis? So definitely know that. With this, I'm gonna, after the video is finished, I'm also gonna send out a 3-page document that I have put together, which is very beautiful and great, that talks about mainly the electrolytes and the acid-base balance and respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis, and how these balances or these acid-base differences can be fixed either through the kidneys or respiration. So what you would read on that document is the section that's about the respiratory part, but the rest you can save, because we're going to go over this again when we get to the urinary section, and the urinary system has its own way of balancing the acid base as well as the respiratory system. So for that, I would refer you to page 10 of respiratory system lecture notes, section 18.24. Respiratory system lecture notes, page 10, section 18.24, and it talks about respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. Remember, respiratory acidosis happens when your breathing rate is shallow and you're not breathing enough. You're not breathing as fast. You're not breathing normally. Your breathing has slowed down. So elderly people with emphysema, they're gonna have lower breathing rate. So what ends up happening is carbon dioxide buildup in the lungs, in the system, because they are not exhaling enough. So this leads to acidosis. So what would happen to the pH with acidosis? Would it go up or down? pH would go down, exactly. And respiratory alkalosis, the way that I think about it, it doesn't happen very often unless the way that I have it inside my brain when this was taught to me in pharmacy school and graduate school, and when I was doing residency, is during childbirth, when the lady is basically inhaling and exhaling rapidly or rapidly breathing. So in that case, what are you doing? Exhaling too much carbon dioxide, and what's end up happening is respiratory alkalosis. So the pH would go up and it would become respiratory alkalosis. Anyways, I think that was enough explanation for you to answer the question right there. You don't even need to go to page 10 of Respiratory System Lecture Notes, section 18.24. You should be able to answer it based on the explanation that I just gave you. Next one, we are going to the blood section now. Very easy. I want you to know the definition of hematocrit. What is hematocrit? Page 3 of Blood Lecture Notes, section 14.3. Next question, I want you to be familiar with the composition of blood, specifically composition of serum. I would refer you to page 10 of Blood Supplemental Notes, bottom of the page, where it talks about the plasma. It also talks about the serum, the components of the serum. Or you can go to page 1 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective B. Next question. I want you to be familiar with the mechanism and the steps of hemostasis. Steps and mechanism of hemostasis. I would refer you to page 6 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective F. It has the steps, so be familiar with those steps. There is a question on that. The correct events or the steps that takes place in hemostasis. So page 6 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective F, or page 20 of Blood Supplemental Notes, figure 6.5. It's the same one. It goes step by step, so remember the steps. Or just copy the figure on page 20 of Blood Supplemental Notes and put it in your, when you are making your study guide for the exam. Copy that figure and put it in your study guide so you can have it, because it goes over the steps of hemostasis. Next one is, I want you to be familiar with types of leukocytes or white blood cells. Which is the most common? function of each. And for that, I would refer you to page 8 of Blood Lecture Notes table 14.3. Again, copy that table, read that table, study that table, have that table in front of you when you're taking the exam. Put it in your study guide that you're making for yourself. If you're making a study guide to a study, definitely have that table 14.3 on page 8 of Blood Lecture Notes. Next one, I want you to at least be familiar with the factors that are involved in the clotting pathway. I don't want you to remember the whole extrinsic, intrinsic clotting pathway and memorize the whole thing. You're going to do that later when you get to graduate school, okay? As far as we are concerned, I want you to be familiar at least with the factors that are involved in clotting pathways. For that, I would refer you to page 7 of Blood Lecture Notes, figure 14.5. Figure 14.5, page 7 of Blood Lecture Notes. Copy that figure, put it in your study guide. Study that figure, know that figure. Also, another familiar figure that goes over the same concept of the factors that are involved in clotting pathway is page 250 of Blood Text Reading, figure 11.7. You can copy that figure and or you can draw it down, learn it, memorize it, read it, and know the factors that are involved in the pathway. By the factors, I mean factors like thrombin, fibrinogen, prothrombin, all that. So be familiar with those. Next question, I want you to make sure definitely when we are talking about blood, at this point you should know what anemia is. So what is anemia? If you don't already know, go to page 18 of Blood Supplemental Notes and read the whole page. Actually, the whole page is a really good read, easy read, and it talks about anemia. It goes a little bit too detailed because it talks about different kinds of anemia, where you have macrocytic, microcytic, but just know the general definition of anemia. And then I want you to also know where are red blood cells produced. You should already know that, where red blood cells are produced. Okay, it's in bone marrows. But if you didn't know, I would refer you to page 2 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective C. Next one, I want you to be familiar with components of blood plasma. Components of blood plasma. Specifically, components of plasma proteins. Okay? You can find that on page 8 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective H, as Harry. Next one is about erythropoiesis and erythropoietins. How does erythropoiesis get stimulated? So page 4 of Blood Lecture Notes, 2 sections for this. I want you to read section 14.7 and 14.8. So page 4 of Blood Lecture Notes, what activates, what stimulates erythropoiesis. And afterwards you have erythropoietins coming in. So there's a really good explanation, quick read, two short paragraphs, page 4 of Blood Lecture Notes, section 14.7 and 14.8. Okay. Next one, I want you to be able to describe, very easy, describe erythrocytes or red blood cells. Okay. That would be on page 2 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective C. Page 2 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective C. It talks about the shape, what it contains, the lifespan, and everything, the basic things about erythrocytes or red blood cells. Page 2 of Blood Lecture Notes, Objective C. Next, I want you to know, you should already know this question. It's a repeat question from the tissue section that we had previously, we covered earlier during the semester. And that's the major difference between cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle. There is something that cardiac muscle has that skeletal muscles do not have. So you should already know that by now. If not, I would recommend you go back to your lecture notes from the tissue lectures and read up on it. What is the major difference between cardiac muscle and a skeletal muscle? Next, we're going to get to the heart. Of course, know valves of the heart. Know the valves of the heart. Best place for that I have found is for you to go to, I would refer you to page 4 of Heart and Blood Vessel Lecture Notes. Page 4 of Heart and Blood Vessels Lecture Notes. And look at table 15.2. Copy the table, jot down the table, save the table, study the table, read the table, know the table. Know the valves, know the location of the valves, know the structure, and know the function of the valves, okay? Next one, I want you to be able to know and describe coronary circulation, okay? Coronary circulation. That would fall under, basically, I would refer you to page 6 of Heart and Blood Vessel Lecture Notes, Objective G. Objective G. Where it talks about, it's very simple, coronary circulation. That's how the heart provides oxygen for itself, through the coronary circulation. Next, after that, I want you to be familiar with the pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary circuit is very important, specifically pulmonary veins. And then be familiar with pulmonary arteries, because there is one major difference between all the arteries in the body versus the arteries of the pulmonary system, and a major difference between the veins of all the body and veins of the pulmonary system. Usually arteries carry what? Blood away from the heart. What kind of blood? Oxygenated blood. In case of pulmonary circuit, it's the opposite. Pulmonary veins are the ones that are carrying the oxygenated blood, and pulmonary arteries carry deoxygenated blood. So that's that's just very important to know and to remember. The one exception to arteries in the whole body, so you cannot exclusively say arteries, all arteries carry oxygenated blood. No. Mm-mm. Because pulmonary arteries do not carry oxygenated blood. And you cannot say all veins in the body carry deoxygenated blood. No, that is not true because of that one exception. Pulmonary veins actually carry oxygenated blood. So again, be familiar with pulmonary circuit, specifically pulmonary veins. I would refer you to page 5 of Heart and Blood Vessels lecture notes, objective E as elephant. Next is blood flow through the heart. Blood flow through the heart. You should know this by now because we covered it in the lab. But of course, there's going to be a question on it on the lecture exam too because it's important. And for that, I would refer you to page 2 of Heart and Blood Vessel supplemental notes. Bottom of the page, there is a flow chart. Bottom of the page, 2 of Heart and Blood Vessel supplemental notes, there is a flow chart. Make sure you know that flow chart, remember that flow chart. Of course, names of the valves, remember there are interchangeables. There are not just one name for a valve. Some valves have multiple names. Like if it says semilunar valve in the flow chart, that wouldn't mean I would necessarily use the same vocabulary semilunar valve in the question. I'm going to use the interchangeable phrase for that valve. Next question, I want you to be able to compare arteries, veins, and capillaries. Specifically, be able to compare arteries and veins and know what capillaries are. Okay? For this, I would refer you to page 11 of Heart and Blood Vessels lecture notes. Page 11 of Heart and Blood Vessels lecture notes, objective B. And also the following page, page 12 of Heart and Blood Vessel lecture notes, table 16.1. Okay? Page 12 of Heart and Blood Vessels lecture notes, table 16.1, and the previous page, objective B. As for the table, again, copy the table, draw it down, write it down, remember it, memorize it, have it in front of you, put it in your study guide that you're making for yourself. Know that table, okay? It's a good table to have, and it's a good table to remember. Next question is about the electrical conduction system of the heart, or intrinsic conduction system of the heart. For that, I would refer you to page 8 of Heart and Blood Vessel supplemental notes, the whole page. Page 8 of Heart and Blood Vessels supplemental notes, the whole page. And I want you to be familiar with the correct order of electrical signaling, okay? Where it starts and the steps, and look at the chart and know the order of the signaling. Next one, the following page of the same document, there is a follow-up question about ECG. We're not going to go into very much detail about ECG. all I want you to know about ECG is the description section on page 10 of heart and blood vessel supplemental notes, and be familiar with the three different waves, P waves, QRS complex, and T waves. Again, when you're reading about P waves, and when you're reading about the QRX complex, and when you're reading about T waves, if on a question, for example, on the reading, you see it says ventricular depolarization, and you look at the question and you do not see ventricular depolarization, but you see ventricular excitation, and you're like, oh, that's not the same phrase. But you have to remember, if you have studied the whole packet, if you have kept up with the lectures and kept up with the readings, you would know when I say ventricular excitation, same as ventricular depolarization. Okay, so be familiar with the three different waves for ECG: P wave, QRS complex, and T wave, and that's on page 10 of heart and blood vessel supplemental notes. Next question I'm asking about, very simple, location of baroreceptors. Location of baroreceptors. I would refer you to page 14 of heart and blood vessels supplemental notes. In the description section, go to number 3, where it talks about baroreceptors, okay? And it will tell you where the locations are. Next question, I want you to know the definition and be familiar and be comfortable with cardiac output and the stroke volume. Know what each of them mean. And I would refer you to page 30 of heart and blood vessel supplemental notes, page 30 of heart and blood vessel supplemental notes. In the description section, the first paragraph, it gives you the definition of each: cardiac output and a stroke volume, and then there is a formula too. As we talked about the pulmonary circuit and coronary circuit, there is also a question about hepatic portal circulation. Specifically, hepatic portal vein is important. And I want you to read about that on page 405 of heart and blood vessel text reading. Page 405 of heart and blood vessel text reading, where it talks about the section that begins with hepatic portal circulation. Also, you can, I would refer you to page 18 of heart and blood vessel supplemental notes, where it talks about digestive organ and a spleen, so on the bottom of the page. But I really like the explanation and the paragraph that's on page 405 of the heart and blood vessel text reading section, hepatic portal circulation. Last but not least, blood pressure. I want you to know what systolic pressure is and what diastolic pressure is. For that, I would, again, the best source, and from the readings, I looked at the supplemental, I looked at the lecture, and then I looked at the text. and I would refer you to page 408 of Heart and Blood Vessel text reading, where it gives you on the section blood pressure. It starts out by giving you the definition of systolic pressure and then the definition of diastolic pressure. Because if you don't know the definition of systolic pressure, and but you know systolic over diastolic, and the normal range is 120/80, you know the units, and you know systolic goes on top, diastolic is on the bottom, and the range is 120/80. But what does that mean? So that's why I want you to be familiar with systolic pressure and know the definition of diastolic pressure. Guys, that should do it for the exam. It's if you have listened to these 50 minutes of me talking and giving you details of which sections to study, and I explained a few concepts as well in this video, which I didn't do in the previous videos. So if that was helpful, let me know. Maybe I can do that for the final exam as well. Actually, I was just thinking about not doing a video this time and just typing everything down like a manuscript instead of me talking and telling you which pages to go to or which sections to go to and study. But with you watching this video, watching this 15 minutes, and write down the notes, writing down the pages that I have referred you to, and going back and studying those pages, studying those tables, listening to those comments that I have made, you will be able to answer every single question correctly. The bonus questions, one of them is from the blood section. That's the select all that apply. So it's a multiple choice question, but it has more than one correct answer. It's only worth 3 points, and then the big one, which is worth 10 points, is the essay question, is on heart and blood vessel. I did mention it when we were going through the questions briefly. Did go over what the question is going to be, and so the only difference here is with this 2 bonus questions that you have with these 13 points, it's timed. So you're going to have 300 minutes, which is plenty of time, but it's not like the first 2 exam extra credit points where you would go in and open up the document and have as long as you want. You would take your time and then submit it, and then I would add it to your exam grade. In this case, it would just be sent to me, and I would grade the essay question, that 10 points, and the rest would be graded automatically. Again, I would go through the exam and grade that essay question, adjust the grades accordingly. So the initial grade right after I grade your essay that you're going to see is not necessarily going to be your final exam 3 grades. We have to wait until everyone submits their exam, and then I would look at the average. I would look at the responses to the questions. I would look at the other statistics, mean, median, average, confidence interval, and maybe throw out some questions, maybe not, maybe depending on the class performance, guys. There can be anywhere from 0 curve points to 5 or 10 or 15 curve points. Depends on how the class performs, okay? That's why another reason I'm not gonna release the answers as soon as you finish up the exam. Because sometimes what happens is someone opens up the exam and guess what? Thunderstorm hits and the internet goes out or your data runs out and your 5 gigs with Verizon, oh, you have reached your limit and you cannot take the exam now. Uh-oh, 5 hours gone and you do not have internet connection. My computer broke down. So things happen. And what I have realized through experience, what I have learned is that what ends up happening that exam, that exam gets submitted by itself, and then the student has only answered 1 or 2 questions and wasn't able to answer the rest of the question because of the power outage or computer broke down and the 5 hours passed, and then when they will be able to review the exam and see all the questions and see all the answers. And that kind of wouldn't be fair to other students who actually sat down and took the exam and put in 5 hours or 3 hours. So that's why I do not release the answers immediately right after you take the exam. If there is a burning desire that you really want to know the answer to a question that you got wrong, you would know which question you got wrong. But if it's really bugging you, you can email me and I will tell you the correct answer. Not gonna take any more of your time, guys. It's kind of late and I'm gonna try to post this, and I have to make another video right after this for my other class actually, because all the exams are on the same week, and I usually wait until the last minute. Next week is our spring break. I mean, not a spring break, is Thanksgiving. Uh, there are no assignments. There are not going to be any lecture notes posted or anything. If you want to study, you can study. If you want to take a break, take a break. You can go ahead and submit your lab exam. That's why I posted it early. You can go ahead and submit it early if you want to. That would be great. And then you would have enough time until the 30th to submit your lecture exam 3. Or if you have watched this video and you feel prepared, you can go ahead and take it before Thanksgiving and submit it. And I would grade it, and I would grade your essay and give you and send you back the score that you've gotten. But again, that would not be your final score because I have to wait until everyone turns in their exam, which is going to take quite a few days until at least the 30th. And on the 31st, I would adjust the exam grades. Not the 31st, it will be December 1st. I don't think November has 31 days. November has 30 days. And then on December 1, I would have to adjust the grades accordingly. So I don't want you to freak out or anything or get upset because you did bad. The score will be adjusted based on the class performance. Some questions might get thrown out. Bonus points might get added. Again, you have 13 points worth of bonus points. So there is that. And also any missing grades, I will follow up with you. But during the week of Thanksgiving, I'm going to put in all the discussion board grades in because I haven't put those in yet. So I highly encourage you to participate in the 3 discussions, and so I can go ahead and put in your grade for discussions. I'm gonna put in the grades, update the grades for homework assignments. Basically, again, 700 points from the lecture section, 300 points from the lab section. You would add up the 700 by the end to the 300, gonna be 1000 points, and whatever you get is gonna divide it by 1000 multiplied by 100, and that would be your grade. But we still have a long way to go because we have our lab 2 exam and lecture final exam, and I think that's quite a few points there, 180 points, and I don't know off the top of my head how many points the let me check, human biology 22 fall, how many points the lab exam. Okay, the lab exam is gonna be 70 points, so we still have 70 points, and then final lecture exam is going to be 180 points, and then you still have this lecture exam that's coming up. It's going to be available in about an hour. That's 130 points, and then the 3 group discussions, they are 10 points each, so that's total of 30 points that everyone should get as long as you participate. I'm going to put those in. The week of Thanksgiving, and then please, the 5 homework assignments have been posted. Get a head start on them. Please submit them. Those are each worth 20 points, and that's total of 100 points. That's a lot of points for homework assignments. That's really easy to get. I don't have any problem with you guys copy and pasting your answers. And that's what I see with a lot of students, just copy and pasting the answers, but a lot of you are copying and pasting the wrong answers. That is totally irrelevant to the question. So try, please guys, try at least, if you are copying and pasting, please copy and paste the right answer, not the wrong answer to a different question that is totally irrelevant to the question that I have asked, because that just shows me that some of you don't even read the question. So again, I don't mind you going and Googling the question, but what I really enjoy seeing in few of you is that original handcrafted answer, and that's beautiful, where you answer the question. And I can tell because I know the sources, I know you can Google the question, I know where you can find the answers from. As soon as I see how you've started your paragraph or how you have given me the answer, I can tell if it's copied or pasted, if it has not even been adjusted. Some of you don't even change the font. Some of it is red, some of it is blue, some of it is bold, some of it is a different text or something, but at least be consistent with that. But so that's 5 homework assignments, and those are all due December 7. So let me know if you have any questions. Email me. Thank you for your attention, and hope you all have a wonderful night. And I'm going to post this on YouTube in a minute. Goodbye, guys.